Have you ever just been scrolling through your news feed in the morning and caught yourself wondering, wait, how did all this actually get selected for me? Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the literal architecture of public attention. We're going to take a really close look at how the daily information diet you consume is, well, carefully curated. Seriously, think about this for a second. Who actually decides what you care about? Like, why do certain stories just blow up, dominating our social feeds, office chats, and dinner table conversations, while other, maybe even equally important events just completely fade into obscurity? You guys, this is not an accident. It's a highly structured system, and understanding it, it's a real game changer. It'll completely change the way you look at the media. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're covering 6 main things: defining the public agenda, the gatekeepers of information, Marxism, tools of control, pluralism, the audience rules, the digital filter bubble, and finally, framing and final thoughts. Let's get to it. Section 1. Defining the public agenda. So to really grasp how our attention is hijacked or, directed, we have to establish a foundational concept in sociology. And it goes like this. Rather than telling audiences what to think, the media shapes what they think about. This classic insight comes from the pioneering work of McCombs and Shaw. They basically realized that when news outlets repeatedly cover specific topics, say immigration, crime, or the economy, it artificially raises the salience of those issues in the public's mind. It's kind of like, well, if you see it everywhere, your brain just automatically assumes it's a massive priority. This is known formally as agenda setting. It's the media's ability to influence which issues the public thinks about and exactly how important those issues appear to be. And honestly, it is an incredibly powerful concept because it demonstrates how the media constructs a public agenda that ultimately frames our political debates, our social concerns, and literally our very perception of reality itself. Moving on to Section 2. The gatekeepers of information. Okay, now that we know what agenda setting actually is, let's look under the hood at the day-to-day mechanics of how this whole psychological process works in the media industry. The process basically boils down to 3 specific methods: selection, omission, and repetition. News organizations, editors, and media owners essentially act as gatekeepers. They control the flow of information by choosing what to select, what to completely omit, and what to repeat endlessly until it finally sticks in your head. And remember, this is absolutely not a neutral process. These are deliberate editorial decisions shaped heavily by organizational routines, political pressures, and, of course, commercial interests. Which brings us to Section 3, Marxism, tools of control. So why do these gatekeepers make the specific choices they do? Let's introduce the first side of our debate here. The Marxist perspective views agenda setting quite skeptically, seeing it as a top-down mechanism of ideological control. From this viewpoint, agenda setting is all about reinforcing dominant ideologies and maintaining hegemony. According to what's known as the cultural effects model, media owners typically belong to the ruling class. And because of this, they use long-term exposure to specific, highly curated narratives to subtly support capitalist interests. Over time, this gradually shapes public consciousness. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that looks in practice. The Marxist argument suggests that elites carefully choose to focus on things like individual responsibility for poverty or maybe youth crime, but at the exact same time, they completely ignore or marginalize structural inequality and corporate wrongdoing. By strategically spotlighting some societal problems and hiding others, the media effectively neutralizes challenges to the status quo. Now for Section 4, pluralism, the audience rules. But you have to ask, is the public really that easily manipulated? Well, this introduces the completely opposing view in our debate, the pluralist argument. They offer a much more democratic take, arguing that audience demand, not elite manipulation, is what actually drives the agenda. So while the Marxist perspective sees elite-driven ideological control, the pluralist perspective sees audience-driven, competition-based demand. Pluralists believe media organizations are, at the end of the day, businesses fighting to survive. Therefore, they simply compete for audiences by prioritizing what an active rather than passive public already cares about. Basically, their argument is, if we didn't want to consume it, they wouldn't produce it. Pluralists point to a bunch of modern developments as proof of this. Think about the rise of digital media, citizen journalism, the massive influx of alternative viewpoints, and social media activism. These all show that audiences aren't just captive subjects. Today, we can bypass traditional gatekeepers entirely. We can actively challenge mainstream narratives, and through the power of the internet, we can actually set our own agendas. Next up, Section 5, the digital filter bubble. Here's where we really start to synthesize the debate, because the whole digital disruption fundamentally changed the entire landscape of public attention. When we compare the two eras, traditional media basically had a single, universal national agenda driven by traditional news outlets and human gatekeepers, like everyone watched the exact same nightly news. But in the digital media era, we now have fragmented, highly personalized agendas driven by algorithms on platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and X. Critics argue that new media didn't eliminate agenda setting at all. No way. It just transferred the power from human editors directly over to engagement-driven code. So the crucial point to take away here is the creation of the filter bubble. It's an environment created by algorithms that prioritize content based strictly on engagement, and this ends up reinforcing your existing interests and severely limits your exposure to diverse perspectives. This highly personalized agenda actually supports postmodernist arguments about the total breakdown of shared social narratives. I mean, we aren't arguing about the same news anymore because, frankly, we aren't even experiencing the same reality. And finally, Section 6, Framing and Final Thoughts. To fully wrap our heads around this topic, we need to distinguish agenda setting from a closely related and honestly incredibly powerful companion concept. That concept is framing. Agenda setting dictates what issues are covered, right? But framing dictates how those issues are presented. For example, agenda setting might successfully bring an issue like immigration to your attention, but framing dictates what it actually means to you. Is it being framed specifically as an economic threat, a humanitarian issue, or maybe a cultural challenge? Those frames completely shape public interpretation and ultimately our political responses. Which leaves us with this final kind of provocative question. When you look at your screen today, are you setting your own agenda, or is the algorithm setting it for you? I really want you to reconsider your own digital consumption and the incredibly complex relationship between media institutions, public perception, and social power. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the narrative and keep seeking to understand how the world around you is actually built.